Hello. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks for your patience. We're trying to get everyone here, and there's some people coming from another session, so we're just trying to not go too fast, but also we want to be polite. First off, I just want to, Neil Portnow, who runs the stage here, just wanted to thank you guys for being here, and this is just a little statement he wrote. So good evening and a very warm welcome to everyone. On behalf of all of us at the Evergreen Enterprise Experience, it's my pleasure to offer our historic and iconic facilities for tonight's meeting, which is also historic in its own, in its own way. Why, I can always speak. What's happening? As I've had the pleasure to know and work side by side with Peter and Jasper, their passion for our unique and special community of creators is unmatched, and I'm proud to share that passion and commitment, as are our colleagues assembled here with the important and vital goal of tackling the many issues and concerns which are key to the health and growth of our industry and those who work within it. Long before my tenure as president and CEO of the Recording Academy, I was a musician and member of the Musicians Union 802 in New York, and so proud to have been a musician, record producer, music publisher, music supervisor, and music industry executive. I've always advocated for personal collaboration, face-to-face discussion, compromise, and finding good paths and solutions to problems. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but the creation of Kappa takes a giant step in that direction, and I salute all who have done the research and homework to get to this point. To all who join in the process of making a better future for our industry, I'm truly sorry not to be here in person, but I am here with you in spirit. Sincere best wishes and a good new year to all. Neil Portnow. So that's from Neil. So tonight was kind of a weird situation. It was really birthed from a need that I was seeing in the community, and it started back basically in October of 24, when one of our dear friends in the industry, Jamie Alvera, was really struggling. Those of you who don't know Jamie, she runs the Warner Brothers stage. She had lost her home, and so this whole community rose, and we raised over $125,000 to support her. It was then that I would be going to the scoring stages and realizing that the people who are on those stages, the people who support us, are the people who are also hurting. It's not just our community, it's the whole fabric of our community. So I wrote an op-ed letter that made its way into the Hollywood Reporter. It was literally speaking from my heart. There was no intention. My wife Jerry can tell you. I just wrote it, and it kind of blew up. And from that point, we had an industry town hall in April of 2025, which brought the entire post-production community together. I don't know how many of you were here, but it was pretty amazing. And from that, we formed an alliance called Kappa, which is the California Post-Production Alliance. It's pretty exciting what's happening. We'll talk about it a little bit, but if you were a founding member of Kappa, can you stand up just really quick? I want to acknowledge you. Matt, Gail, Dennis, Zach Dellinger. So we'll hear tonight, part of all of this is not just about getting our community to work together, but it's getting the entire industry to work together. So this is a post-production alliance that we are trying to raise a lot of money for that will go directly to post-production to inspire all of the people in our industry to work here and post here. So we'll talk about that later, and it's open for membership. And then basically through that, around that same time, myself and Dennis, Jasper, Phil, we just started talking about what can we do to try and drive work back to Los Angeles. This past year, and I'm sure Noah and other people in the room who are contractors, David, can attest to this, I basically had to let 17 movies go to other parts of the world, other parts of the States, and it would have been, I think we estimated about 65 days worth of work, which is a lot of money. And so we're trying to find a way, and we've been meeting with the music prep community to find a way that we might be able to get our foot in the door, to open the door for us to bring in work that we don't get. Not work we have, but work that we don't have. So that's what tonight's about. So Jasper is going to read a letter from one of our executives who kind of states their perspective of the industry. And I think it's important to hear this.
Thank you, Peter. I just want to say from my heart that the goal of tonight and the goal of this continuing dialogue is not to cast blame. It's not to point fingers. It's not to look backwards. It's to look forward. It's to evaluate. Can you speak more into the mic? Absolutely. Thank you. The goal tonight is not to divide. It's not to circumvent. It's not to point fingers or cast blame. That's in the past. We got to look forward. We got to look at where we're at now and how do we keep our industry alive. So I just wanted to make that clear. There's going to be things said that may upset people. It might seem contrary to how they see things or their experience. That's okay. That's not the goal, but there's no way you can have dialogue on something so important where our livelihoods, our futures are at stake and not have conflict, not have emotions. That's okay. But until we get in a room like this and talk, until we read letters that are difficult to hear from very important people, decision makers, people on the front row, on the front lines of this, we're not going to get anywhere. So that's the goal of tonight. And
I want to just say one thing to that. We need to do things in public. Many of you might have gotten a letter today about a group that's trying to do something, but it's anonymous. We don't need to be anonymous. We need to be forthright about what we're trying to do. And to that end, I really, really want to thank Mark Sazer, our president, for being here, and Laura. And Gabriel, who's with Tino's office, our president. It's really important, as Jasper said, that we're not going to all agree. This is not about trying to force anything on anyone. This is just trying to create a dialogue. And as far as I've been in the business a long time, Dennis has been in the business a long time, and David Lowe said to me, "Why aren't you just in Hawaii?" It's like, you're right, David, I should be in Hawaii. But I care so much about this community because I was the guy who was struggling to make it. My first client, my first this, my first that. And I know a lot of you young musicians want to have that same opportunity. We've been blessed to have a community that has been so amazing, but when I see the community dying, I've got to speak up. So that's why we're here tonight. And again, please know this isn't like a personal attack on anyone. This is just our hearts speaking. So without further ado, this is a letter from an executive, a very powerful decision maker in our business. So I just wanted you to hear their perspective. They wrote this anonymously because they also feel a little unsafe in this community right now. So thank you, Jasper.
When I started my career, not too long ago, Los Angeles, with reverence, pride, and respect, was referred to as the film scoring capital of the world. You had to record in Los Angeles to achieve that Hollywood sound. And the default principle for most film and television was to record their music in Los Angeles. There would be multiple sessions happening simultaneously around town on most days. And there were times when it was even challenging to book a session. Recording in London or elsewhere on the globe was typically the less desirable alternative and was the exception to the rule. It was typically done for creative consideration when in search for a more European sound for period films and independent non-studio productions willing to compromise quality for cost. Today, that is no longer the case. In fact, it is almost reversed. Film scores are more often recorded outside of Los Angeles. Video games are never being recorded here, and scoring in town has unfortunately become an exception. Studio executives and filmmakers don't particularly love to travel or waste time on their schedules, but the world has simply changed. So many parts of the landscape of the industry have adapted and evolved. Subsequently, the rules and regulations of the 20th century, to which a small group of signatory producing most of the content were bound, have become an outdated construct. The result is that, as any industry would, film producers, signatory or not, have taken a capitalistic approach to finding more cost-effective ways to create and produce their music. In the meantime, the AFM has remained intransigent and refused to acknowledge their competition. Instead, they have forced a combative stance on the remaining few companies that are now grandfathered into an obligation to face their obsolete financial construct. Even then, there are still ways to do non-union work. More than half a century ago, most of the content that was consumed was made by a handful of major studios. Audiences mostly went to see films in theaters, multiple feature films, each year, as streaming and digital devices didn't exist. Consumers bought physical records, CDs and tapes, a market that crumbled under the weight of digital content. From the landscape of the business, consumer habits, technology, and revenue models, most of what we knew then has drastically evolved. Consequently, this has presented a series of opportunities to take work away from the AFM orchestras and musicians outside of North America. It has significantly moved the needle over a short period of time, which is why we are here today. It may come as a surprise to those who aren't on the business side of these conversations, but the upfront cost of putting a musician in a seat at a session is not what has been driving this change. It is pretty much everything else: new use, reuse, percentage of producers' gross. It is all the back end and secondary markets obligations that tip the scales significantly in favor of not engaging AFM players. If you're purely making a financial and practical analysis, unfortunately, the high musicianship of your LA players is not persuading the bean counters. Is it right or fair that something needs to change even though it has functioned a certain way for decades? That is simply the wrong question to ask. The right questions are these. How do we compete with domestic and international orchestras to keep work in Los Angeles? What are other states and countries doing that we have failed to grasp? And what demands are we still making today that are no longer concerns in other markets? Do those questions make you uncomfortable? Do they make you mad? Probably, and they should. Being angry at a percentage of zero is still zero does not change the reality that your competition is taking your work away with better financial terms and fewer strings attached for the life of their recordings. Numbers on a spreadsheet are not changed by emotion or historical context. Better financial terms and greater back-end flexibility give your competition an advantage. You are not doing anything to change those terms. Making incremental changes will not fix the issues we are facing, nor will slightly relaxing the impact of new use and reuse. Demanding all the same categories and levels of revenue participation from the same few signatories that make up a smaller market share of producers won't make them wake up. They will not realize the error of their modern cost-conscious ways. Not changing our ways will simply continue to motivate them to figure out more cost-effective, efficient, and practical solutions. You could agree or disagree with that premise, but in the meantime, most of the work is going or has permanently gone elsewhere. Wouldn't it make more sense to try significant moves and see what could happen, rather than strangle your own livelihood until there's simply nothing left of it? You must ask yourself, what is the competition doing? Why is it worth the time, the energy, and the expense to put several people on planes and in hotels to give them what could have been your work? Are people still required to travel, or do remote sessions, does that make it easier now? All of that said, you must understand how much the people making these decisions respect and revere you, the musicians who are still considered to be part of an important legacy and among the best in the world at what they do. It is the same decision makers who very likely would prefer to sleep in their own beds and walk into one of the legendary recording studios in Los Angeles, who want to make film scores the way they deserve to be made. Despite some uninformed quick takes about California, the AFM issues in Los Angeles are not part of the broader story about film and TV production leaving the city because of tax incentives. They involve a completely different set of factors, as outlined above. That said, there is a horrible analogy that Los Angeles is at risk, if not past the point of no return, to become the film industry what Detroit has become to the automobile industry. And it should keep all of you up at night that Los Angeles could be reduced to a footnote in this chapter of history. But London will soon have 4 state-of-the-art large-scale orchestral multimedia recording facilities: Air, Abbey Road, Decca, and Maida Vale. Los Angeles used to have at least 6: Fox, Sony, Warner Brothers, Paramount, Tadeo, Goldwyn, and others. We are now down to 3, and those 3 will hopefully stay in business, but are clearly at risk. All that to say that your AFFM leadership should feel urgently compelled to make some significant and strategic moves, and this being said as soon as possible. A radical rewrite of the AFFM agreement isn't likely and realistically doable, but maybe it is possible to try something on a provisional let's see what happens basis. I would implore the leadership of the AFFM to explore what may be possible within the constraints of their appropriate channels. If the union is able to try something more drastic to compete on the world stage and it succeeds, it will be hugely telling about what has been driving the decline in work. If it doesn't, the status quo can always remain and we can continue to hope for the best. Either way, it is pretty clear that making only small moves or no moves at all will not stop your community's livelihood from dwindling. There is a path to regaining Hollywood's title of film music capital of the world. I and so many others in our unique corner of the business implore you to step up and make efforts to look at all the ways in which you can compel your leadership and challenge the status quo to make that happen.
Thank you. We received several letters we're not going to read to you guys from composers and other people who feel very much the same, that their hands are tied and they want to be working with us, but because of the restraints that they're faced and what the companies are telling them, they can't. Just by a show of hands, how many people love what we do? And how do you love playing music in the studios and doing all that? Raise your hand if you actually love what you do. Okay, so pretty much everyone. How many of you are worried about the future of our business? Raise your hands. Thank you. So that's why we're here tonight. Okay? It's not for any reason. It's not about Encompass or me or anyone else. It's about the care we have for this community. And there's a whole other 500, 600, 700 seats of people that I'm sure could be here to hear this. And we are filming this. This will be available for everyone. We're not hiding anything. This is all out in the open. So you guys can have action of this. But we're going to go to some slides now. And the smartest man in the room, Dennis Dreith.
I'm not so sure about that.
Yes, you are.
Make sure his microphone is.
Oh, is your microphone on? Yeah, there you go.
So I guess what we're going to say is, I'm sure that a lot of you know this, but when we look at this slide, what this represents are the signatories to our agreement. These are the companies that form the bedrock of our business. And for years and years and years, the majority of pictures were produced by these people, and we had a kind of a stranglehold on this business. Unfortunately, these companies really have become the companies now that distribute pictures. They buy pictures from other producers. So we really have, this is the same kind of group of signatories that we really have had almost from the inception of the agreement. Now, it's true that others can use the agreement. I mean, independent producers can, by an assumption agreement, they can actually use the terms and conditions of the agreement. But it's basically these people who make the decisions and are the current, and this is our current agreement is based on these companies. And they do provide, some substantial employment, and we're not looking to change anything about that. We want to keep all of that. We'd like to see that stay exactly as it is. But if we take a look at the next slide, the kind of shocking thing about this to me is these are all this is not even a full list. These are all the non-signatory companies. And you look at this, and it's interesting because you'll see, for example, Warner Animation. Well, it's Warner Brothers. Shouldn't that be Warner Brothers? Shouldn't they be signed to the agreement? but they're not. All these companies have legal ways, whether we like it or not, and we may actually feel that it's inappropriate and unethical the way they do it, but they form other companies to basically be able to circumvent our agreements. Sony Animation, Universal Television, I can go on and on. Look at this list. It's kind of shocking. This is the target. These are the people that really aren't employing us. And this is what we really want to see, if we can find a way to get an inroad and attract this very group of people to work with us. So.
Yeah, and I mean, surprisingly, a lot of people see Pixar on there. We do a lot of Pixar movies, but they're not a signatory. They could choose not to do anything here, but they do because of the tradition and the legacy they have of all the work you guys have done for them, the quality of work. So when we were putting this together, and this, again, is just touching the surface, I know a lot of the composers here work for a lot of these companies. This is a massive amount of work we don't have. And this is what we're coming to you tonight to talk about. How do we capture this work without disrupting what we already have? And so we're going to talk about where work has gone, and the next slide will kind of show you it's pretty drastic.
So, if we look at this, I think we're not saying anything that most of you don't already know. If you look at this, I'm sure that anecdotally, everybody's pretty aware of this, that if we look back, in the early part of this decade, in 2001 through the early part of that, if you look, we have 207 pictures that were done by the AFM, through the AFM, and as we watch that line slowly go to the right there, to where we're down to 83 in between 21 and 23, at the same time, we watched that the non-union pictures that were kind of in our same category, the 83, that's kind of switched places and that's moved up. So we've just, our roles have reversed. What was really our market share has really kind of moved around. And I think that's an important thing. We should really look at any business. When you look at something, one of the first things you want to say is, what's our market share? What's the potential market? What's out there? What can we get? And what share of the market do we have? So if we want to look at the next slide, and I just thought this would really be helpful to take a look at this. If we really looked at 1996, and it'd be interesting if we looked at the greed section, which is really the AFM, if we rolled that back to the 80s, that pie chart would be reversed. But even in 1996, we did 216 pictures in that year out of a little over 500 that were made. These are basically theatricals that have a theatrical release. So we wanted to try to compare apples to apples as much as possible. Obviously, streaming didn't exist in those years and it wasn't a thing. And if we move that to 2008, we still have a very solid market share. By 2008, what had happened is independent filmmaking had sort of begun to take hold, but it was still a lot of art films, things that really wouldn't incorporate a large orchestra score. And even in 2008, we still had 207 pictures. If we fast forward to now, we look at this, what's happening now, and our slice of this pie has gotten very, very small. And I know that we may have a really good week or a month here and there. We have some outliers. We have, this is a really busy time right now, and it's fabulous to see the kind of work that's going on right now. But I don't think that it's going to be sustainable. And if we look at this, our market share has really shrunk to an unacceptable level. If we look at this, and part of this is because the business has changed so much. A lot of these pictures they're not being made by the studios. They may be distributed by the studios. They're made by companies that may be owned and controlled by the studios, but they don't have to use our services. So that's the state we're in right now, and I think we probably know that, but I thought it would just be helpful to really take a look at what our market share really looks like right now. So
to that point, obviously, the question then is, what are the roadblocks? What are the reasons that perhaps this work is not scoring here? If in fact any production company, any entity can adhere to and sign on to agreements that currently exist, why don't they? Aside from all the other metrics. And so we made some bullet points of what we understand to be some of the major reasons that happens.
Yeah, and I mean, these are things when we talk to, in the 17 movies that didn't stay in Los Angeles, these are a lot of the reasons we were given of why they didn't stay here. And, we all know that non-union work is happening. Even with that, people don't want to work here because they're afraid of getting in trouble, of something happening. And a lot of these films have gone to Nashville, and I try to explain to them, why are you going to Nashville? That's still within the jurisdiction. There is a mindset, and a lot of this has to do, and I know we've all talked about this, about rebuilding the relationships that have been damaged over the years by different entities, not just the AFM, but other people who have come involved and kind of made producers not want to work here, and the obligations. And so we kind of, as we were sitting together, many dinners, many times in meetings, we kind of put a list together of the things that we're hearing and seeing and what's causing these roadblocks, and then kind of comparing our competitors and why are people going there. So, you know, options limited to a single project agreement or non-union, signatory liability if filming in the US, fear of union retaliation or loss of work, secondary markets, reuse or new use, soundtrack, promotional use are cost prohibitive. A lot of times there's costs involved in promoting a product. If someone wants to do something and promote a product, hey guys, the behemoth crowd. Are you awake? Thank you for being here. And then the complexity of the agreements. Our agreement, the AFM Basic Theatrical Agreement, is 197 pages long. The BMU agreement is 37 pages long. And we hear that from a lot of our producers, that it's just by the time they get to page 50, they're just like, they're done. They don't even want to look at things anymore. And we're hearing this from labor lawyers and everyone else. And of course, tax incentives, which we'll talk about later with CAPA. Those are things that are kind of outside of our control, but we have to try and push for so we can have an even playing field. But these are kind of the roadblocks that we've been seeing, so we're just presenting these to you.
So Peter, if I could maybe
Yeah.
interject one thing. It's interesting when you look at the AFM agreement, and by, it sounds horrible, 197 pages, but really this is the product of decades of collective bargaining. And so lawyers on both sides have gotten familiar with this and used to it. And, there are provisions that just kind of stay in the agreement that are probably arcane and don't longer there, but nobody wants to take them out, and it becomes a living document. But the people who use that understand it and work with it. One of the problems we have, I just went through this on a picture that I did, where we wanted to, and ultimately they just took my word for it. So I guess that was the good news. But what happened was somebody looked at the agreement and they said they were afraid the 197 pages, they had to have their lawyer look at it. It was going to cost them. They started figuring how many musicians it was going to cost them not to hire to have their lawyer look at the agreement. And, it's crazy, but that's how they view it. And so part of it is we need to find some ways to simplify some things, at least for that market.
There's also been discussion I've heard from both agents and fellow composers, whereby it used to be, we're not AFM, we're not going to sign an FM agreement, here's $50,000 or $5,000 or whatever the point is, bring us back a score. We don't care how you do it, but it's not AFM. That now has shifted to bring us back a score, but you cannot record in the United States. We don't want to even have the conversation or even touch the realm of potential obligation. We don't want to set the precedent. This is stuff that's being put into your contracts. That's on a whole nother level now. And there's not even a chance of that work staying in town or even domestically in the United States. I know many of you have experienced that, and you're seeing that language more and more. And in my mind, that is a bit of an escalation there where there is no chance of anything happening because they don't even want to run the risk of obligation or a conversation or, most importantly, precedent.
And we used to have composers that would stand up and push back and demand to stay here. That doesn't exist anymore. Even the top composers don't push back. Maybe John Williams does because he can, but every single person I work with just always says to me, I'm sorry, I wish we could do it here, but I can't. We're told we have to go elsewhere. So I'm sure all the contractors in this room know how hard we all fight to try and keep things here. And we're just hitting ourselves. It's just the wall every time. So this proposal that we've been working on is literally 14 pages long. Very simple, very easy to digest. Are we moving on to CAPA now? So this I'm very excited about. This is going to be the game changer if we can get this across the table, because if we can have a new proposal that employers can see that is something positive that matches things they're used to in the workplace, and then we have California tax incentives, it's game over. This town is going to be so busy. So a lot of us here have formed this California Post Alliance. It's based on the New York Tax Alliance, but this will have some incredible incentives for scoring, for post-production. And so right now we're in the fundraising stage. We have lobbyists, we have economists, we have people that came out from this town hall. Matt is amazing. I want to give Matt Evans a big shout out. He's been incredible. But we meet voluntarily every week, every Sunday. We've been meeting for months, this group, giving up our Sundays to try and raise awareness. We now have a huge group of post-production companies that are joining this. I'm going to ask the AFM to be part of this because it's going to be huge. We're going to ask SAG to be part of it. And if we can get this, we will have a very many $1 million, tens of millions of dollars that will go specifically for post-production, nothing else. So you guys will know about it. There's individual membership. I think, what is it, $250 or something like that is what it's going to be.
$240.
$240, okay. We lowered it. Corporations will be different, but it's something that I think will turn things around, because the credits right now that we have, the $750, we're not seeing a lot of movies made. Behemoth was one of them. I started on that film before Tim kind of took it over, and I think they got an $7 or $8 million tax credit from California, and that was the only way they could do that movie here. So we're really excited about this. This is going to be a perfect left and right hand for the proposal that we're hoping to present, that hopefully our leadership can talk about, and maybe if they feel and you guys feel it's something important, we'll move forward with. So that's just something I want you all to know about.
Hello, I'm Phil.
Phil Rapa.
I am going to speak tonight. That's the biggest twist of this whole thing. We're not going to talk about this very long because we're kind of preaching to the choir. But we did want to bring this up. There's a level of cost in some of these other places that we simply can't compete with. And we're not going to compete with, basically what you're seeing here is for every dollar that is spent in LA on scoring, if a musician made $1 in Budapest, they'd make 17 cents is basically what you're seeing. So, that is such a huge hill to climb, and there's many reasons for that. And one of the main reasons for that is that it is expensive to live here. So this was the same data that we shared at our town hall in April. We did a lot of research on cost of living in all these different places around the world of, how many sessions would you have to do to survive? And so what you're seeing here, we did a study of if you were to work 3 double sessions a week, which I'm sure most people here are rarely even doing that these days, what your take-home pay would be after everything is taken out, how much you'd bring home. It's really not that much. That's, single scale if you're a, rank and file player. And then the numbers below that you're seeing are basically what percentage of that number is needed to sustain yourself in each of these places. So, in LA, if you brought home $65K, which as we know is really not a lot in this town, basically to live in an apartment with a roommate and have a car and pay for food, 66% of that is about, or what does that say? 68% of that is about what you need. And you, of course, cannot, sustain a family on that. And that's the case in all these places. So this proposal that we're going to talk about, our goal is to help change that and not to take away the upfront wages of any musicians, because we know how serious this plight is. And, we just wanted to show that even on top of just your house, there's no savings or childcare or nothing. You can't really even support a family doing this by yourself in its current state. So we thought, of course, everyone here knows how dire this is, but we just wanted to, share the numbers for you. That'll take us into a little more of the details of what we've actually kind of been conceiving. So Dennis, if you want to talk about this.
So what we talked about is, we're not suggesting in any way that we go back to bargain with the Alliance and try to change anything in the existing agreement. And I think most of you are familiar with the term promulgated agreements. And what happens is that we actually have the ability to decide, apart from anything that happens with the industry, with the Alliance, we can actually, through the union actually has the ability to generate an agreement. I mean, we have several examples of that. I think the first video game was that. We have the demo agreements are promulgated agreements, the limited pressing agreement. There are a number of examples of agreements that didn't have a collective bargaining process. And we think that this is really the kind of way to go with having a new agreement. To bargain something right now would be time-consuming, expensive, and put us kind of back in the same situation. So we don't think that, trying to go to the Alliance and coming up with a separate type of agreement is a good idea, but what we could do is generate on our own an agreement. And the beauty of that is it gives us the ability to experiment. It doesn't have to be cast in concrete. We have the idea to try to change some things, to experiment with some things. If some things work really well, we can expand on them. If things don't work well at all, we can change those. If we find that it's not having the desired results, we can make changes there. But all of that has to happen, by the way, with the union. It has to happen with the RMA, with the local, with the federation. These are things you would have to do through those organizations. But those are the organizations that actually can generate that kind of an agreement.
So this brings us to the hard work we did to compare our competitors. And this was quite a job. So we sat, like I said, many dinners, many discussions about what is, we always hear, well, London is your competitor, and pretty much everyone, we don't want to work for any other place. London is our competitor on every level, and it's clear that that's where most work has been going. I talked to my counterparts, Isabel, and other people there. Her team has doubled in size in the last year and a half because there's so much work going there. And Hans just is building, he's basically taking over the old BBC building and building Maideville, which will be open for business in the next 3 years. There's a lot going on in London. So we tried to look at what it is they're doing and how can we compete and actually take them out of the game while giving you all something that is positive without, again, I want to say this clearly, without touching anything we already have. This is all about what we don't have. So what we did was we looked at the rates in London based on the pound and everything else, and looked at our current agreements, and the proposal that we're suggesting meets a lot of the things we're hearing that are being argued by the companies, industry, whatever. Well, these are the things when I go to say, well, we'd like to work here. Well, you can't because of this, because of this, because of this. So you'll see the comparisons of everything here. We looked over, and again, this may maybe make some people upset, but these are the facts. This is what our competitors are making, and our top competitor being the BMU, or the British Musicians Union. And so we looked at this based on the fact of what it takes to live here, and if you were working, and we kind of came up with some thoughts and ideas. Again, these are just ideas and thoughts. That's what you guys, if you want to take the next step to talk about this and go from there. The biggest thing we're hearing from a lot of people are reuse and new use fees, which can be astronomical. I did a reuse for Paramount Pictures about 2 years ago for the Forrest Gump, run Forrest Run. By the time I did the new use, it was well over $120,000 that they wanted to just use in a commercial by the time we paid everybody. What we're suggesting is a license fee for new use, which will be a different model than a secondary market, but it is a residual payment. It is a payment for everybody, so you're not gonna miss out. So basically, if there's a $50,000 license, the musicians will get $5,000 shared amongst the musicians. It will encourage the companies to want to use this model more and more and more. And it's already been established by SAG. And Jasper, if you want to mention that a little bit of what SAG has done.
Yeah, so a number of years ago, SAG put in place what they had was a number of, lots of music was being dropped into film, TV commercials from sound recordings. So phono to film, simply put. And what was happening was there would be a song licensed and an agreement made on a price. Let's say that's $20,000. Only come to find out that there was a choir, there was singers, such that in reuse dollars would equate to $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, in some cases more if there was a choir. So not only would they agree to this license fee, but then all of a sudden they'd be hit with this reuse amount, and then started the back and forth of, well, we're not paying that. That's your responsibility. You're the original signatory. It's your obligation. Well, no, we're in part of our license. You have to pay that. And this back and forth. So you had stacks upon stacks of claims that never got dealt with, and a fraction of those would actually ever be paid. And what ultimately SAG-AFTRA decided was, if we can put, and again, there was a threshold for the larger licenses, they would just be handled as traditional reuse or conversion payments. But for the smaller amounts, where it really affected them, they established a system whereby the performers would get a percentage of that license fee. So you no longer had two amounts, a license fee and then, in some cases, an exorbitant additional reuse payment. So that $10,000 license fee remained at $10,000, and the understanding would be that a percentage of that would be pulled out and distributed amongst the performers in a bit of a profit sharing. So the most important thing that happened is, does that mean they're making less money? Sure, but they're making less money on now a large number of these that didn't go to claims. They were, what would you rather have? The idea of thousands of dollars that were never paid because they were just in perpetual claim mode, or smaller amounts that in every instance were agreed to. So they collected more of these license fees, and in the end put more money in the pockets of those performers. And so it's been a very successful model, and now it just suddenly became like, okay, not a problem, because it wasn't this additional financial surprise that was hitting them. So the thinking is that if we could somehow present and propose that same kind of formula, that might actually be more successful than a percentage of zero, as was kind of referenced earlier, whereby nothing happens. So in a sense, it could be quantity over quality, for lack of a better term.
So I think it's important to also notice, we've heard a lot of talk about the Secondary Markets Fund and what an impediment that is. And I think the idea being, we should not think of getting rid of the Secondary Markets Fund, but needs a little bit of a reset, at least in terms of this type of a market. I'm not talking about the regular film agreement, but for independent productions, it is an impediment to them, and if we can find a reset. The idea behind the 10% licensing fee is that would actually go to the Secondary Markets Fund. The fund is already set up on a pro rata share basis. It would be so easy for them to administer something like this. It works much like producers' gross, except it's just a percentage of a licensing fee. So it's a way to actually push new money into that fund and change it. So it's kind of like a little bit of a reset. And so I think that was just something to think about.
Yeah, and a couple other things from, I know, again, my fellow contractors know this. There's nothing worse if you're in a double session and a composer is recording a cue, and I have to tell them, or you have to tell them, we can't do the overdub now. We've got to do it after lunch. This gets rid of that. If you got a double session, do your overdub at the same time, because overdubs add more time, so it's not like people are trying to do something illegal. It's just, and then we would have a situation on indie films again only. If they wanted to do a second pass or a third pass, it would be at 50%, not at another 100%. The soundtracks would be free up to 100,000 units, because most of these films or TV shows don't release anything. Most of the things that pay anyway are Frozen or certain things that are big, big movies. So that's likely never gonna go away on the big movies for Disney and other things. But it just kind of takes this pressure off of these companies, and it matches more of what they're used to. So we can then become lean and mean and more capable of working with these companies. So we'll go to the next slide.
Peter, can I ask a question about that, or are you doing questions at the end?
We're doing it at the end, but if you have a question, go ahead, Tim.
About the last thing, I'll ask at the end.
Okay.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, sure. So, these are the other provisions that, kind of just on a day-to-day, again, as a contractor, being in this business for 30 years, dealing with stuff, there's oftentimes sessions that they don't need 3 hours. So, we're proposing a 2-hour session with a higher rate for the musicians, but it's something that will be, if I'm a composer and I'm going, God, I really don't want to have a 3-hour session, I can get this done in 2, why do we punish people for that? So this is another reason to do that. I want to thank the prep community, Mark Graham and Fine Line and all, they also have provisions they have on music prep, which they can talk about. And someone should have been up here probably to do that. You'll see the overdubbing, you'll see, we talked about the license fee structure. And the other thing that, this is a little bold, but some of our companies will say, God, I would just pay double your fee if I can just have the right to use the music and everything. So we have something called the corporate combined use, which is basically paying everyone double their wages. And they would be able to use this music for this product in their theme parks, cruise ships, whatever they want to use it in, which is basically what they get to do in most places if it's non-union. If they go to Vienna, wherever they're going, they get to use this. And this is what they're saying. Again, we're just proposing things, but it seems like a smart idea. So, Phil, your turn.
Yeah, so looking at this, it looks very optimistic. Want to be clear, we can't promise anything. This is merely a hypothetical situation. We looked at the numbers of, let's just say this proposal became ink and became a thing, and we recovered of those 200 a year that are gone, even a quarter of them, and half of them, so like 50 films, half of them did an 80-piece orchestra, just a single double session, and half of them did a 50-piece orchestra for a double session, because bigger and smaller films. And of course there are low budget rates that we didn't really get into. This is just a kind of a bird's eye view. How much wages it would bring in, and how much it would bring in dues to the fund or to the AFM. So, we think this is a really positive thing, and it's easy to look at big green numbers and go, oh, this is fantastic. Let's just but this seemed like a very kind of mediated estimate of, even if just some of the work of all those companies that we saw that aren't signatories, if even some of them were interested in doing this or experimenting with this, that the results could be really fantastic.
So I think that really brings us to what we talked about, next steps. And this is really the point where I think it's important to point out, as I said earlier on, that this is a process that has to be done through the union. We're not suggesting, just to hand this off. This is not an end. This is a start. We really meant this as to have a beginning of a dialogue. This is something that would, like any other proposal that people bring. I know, Mark, we've seen a lot of committees and we've seen proposals come in. We've seen the amount of changes, the tweaking it can do. We fully expect that would be the process from this, and it really should start, as I see it, with the RMA committees, with a real discussion among them to see what could happen. Ultimately, this would have to be then discussed, by the locals. You must understand, this is really going to affect locals all over the country, all over the U.S. and Canada. It's not just an L.A. provision. Our agreements aren't. They're not local agreements. Our agreements are national and international agreements. So the idea being that this is a process that would start with the RMA, work through the locals, and ultimately, the only way something like this could happen is with the approval of the Federation, the approval of the International Executive Board, and then create a standalone agreement. As I said, this is like any other new agreement. It's a start, and it's the place to not, rather than a race to the bottom, it's kind of a restart to capture part of the business that we're not even involved in it all, and a way to start to build up from that. So with that, I think,
Dennis, can you kind of just give us a layman's, because literally, for action items for this group of people, what happens? What is the next step? You say it goes to the RMA Solutions Committee, which...
I would say that that would be the right place to send it to the RMA, have them refer it to the Solutions Committee. There's a committee that's supposed to look at the problems for film scoring and come up with solutions. That would be the place to have this really reviewed and debated and amended as necessary. And then at that stage, I would say that it would be local involvement would also be critical in these stages. Involvement of the RMA chapters around the country is also critical because it would affect them. And then the next step would, of course, be engaging their locals and then the Federation. And it's kind of a process that happens kind of simultaneous. It doesn't happen kind of one stage or another. It was really something that would really be kind of organic and really kind of grow as all these things really start to work on this together. But that would be the way, and it's something that can happen. We can make changes. If people don't have no idea, think none of these are good ideas and don't want to do any of it, they can easily stop right here. If people feel that there's some of these are good ideas, you can incorporate those, begin talking about them, but it really has to start with people really deciding what do you guys want to do? This is your business. What do you want to see happen in it? And the best way to do that is be involved in your RMA chapter, in the local, to engage with your officers, both RMA officers and local officers. Show up to union meetings and voice your opinion and start to have some honest discussion with everybody about what we want to see changed and see how we can come about it. I think that's...
And I just want to say, it's so great to see so many people here tonight, so thank you. But it really, when Jasper and I started, we were much younger, I was much younger, and we would show up at the union meetings and, the halls were packed. I mean, this is what a normal union meeting had in it. And so for a lot of the people who have a future, we're kind of set. Dennis and I might just move to Hawaii after this. But we care so much about this community that we want to leave a legacy for you guys that is something positive. And I think some of the musicians, like the legends, like a Paul Jackson Jr. and Dan Higgins, and people in here who have done Gail, so many of you guys, my wife, Jerry, they've seen the magic days. You guys have seen such amazing things. But for the Errols and people who are coming up the ladder, the Jordan Coxes, guys, it's really up to you. These people are here for you. I'm not even in the union, for God's sakes, and I want to join again, but I want to see something change first. And that's why
come on in and you can help the change.
Oh, okay. We can talk about that. But I do, honestly, I will say this. I've had some amazing conversations with our new president, Tino. He does really care, and he's told me several times that it's up to you guys as a body to bring forward, and he will, it comes up the ladder. So he's ready to do whatever we need to do, and I know Mark feels the same, but everyone has to get active. We're meeting every Sunday, we're showing up, we're doing this thing, and this is not a guilt trip, but this is your future. It's not my future, it's your future, and if you want the future, and what I want is I want our union, our local, to be healthy. I want to see it healthy. I want to see it building and booming. And so if all we're doing is non-union work, what does that do? There's no work dues. There's nothing that goes into that. So I see some sort of proposal like this that could become a reality that could mean that we don't have to ever do non-union work ever again. That's what I would love to see happen in this community. And, we're not even talking about the Netflix and the Lionsgate building studios in New Jersey and all the other orchestras that are starting to be built outside of our jurisdiction. So this has to be fast-tracked, and you have to be annoying to these people and talk to them. And again, these are just ideas. Dennis is, like I said, he's the Yoda that I know. Mark's a Yoda. You guys are Yodas. You know what to do. We're just proposing this stuff because I can't leave this business going, it just basically fell apart. So I implore all of you here, every single person, to be involved, to do what you can. It may not be exactly what we had before. I don't think it can be what we had before. But I sure would love to see every stage working, every crew working. When I started, there were 20 plus contractors. Now there's 5 or 6. That's not a healthy business. So all I can say is that I've never felt a more engaging union, a place where, even though I get yelled at sometimes by certain people, I feel like there's dialogue and openness. And so I just encourage you all. I mean, honestly, Dennis and I talked about this. This was kind of my, our summit. It's like a relay race. We're handing this off to you guys now. I've got way too much on my plate, and CAPA's my next thing that I'm going to be focused on trying to get tax credits for our state and for our community. But this is now someone else has to take this, and there's a lot of amazing people in this room who I'm sure want a bright future. So I encourage you all to do this. I do want to open this up to some dialogue if anyone has any questions or thoughts.